Assalamu alaikum. In this video, we're going to discuss, was Islam spread by the sword? It is a common complaint among some non-Muslims that Islam would not have millions of adherents all over the world if it had not been spread by the use of force. The following points will make it clear that far from being spread by the sword, it was the inherent force of truth, reason, and logic that was responsible for the rapid spread of Islam. Islam means peace. Islam comes from the root word salam, which means peace. It also means submitting one's will to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to God the Almighty. Thus, Islam is a religion of peace, which is acquired by submitting one's will to the Supreme Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number two, sometimes force has to be used to maintain peace. Each and every human being in this world is not in favor of maintaining peace and harmony. There are many who would disrupt it for their own vested interests. Sometimes force has to be used to maintain peace. It is precisely for this reason that we have police who use force against criminals and antisocial elements to maintain peace in the country. Islam promotes peace. At the same time, Islam exhorts its followers to fight where there is oppression. The fight against oppression may at times require the use of force. In Islam, force can only be used to promote peace and justice. Now, the opinion of historian DeLacy O'Leary. The best reply to the misconception of Islam was spread by the sword is given by the noted historian DeLacy O'Leary in the book Islam at the Crossroad. On page 8, he says, "History makes it clear, however, that the legend of fanatical Muslims sweeping through the world and forcing Islam at the point of a sword upon conquered races is one of the most fantastically absurd myths that historians have ever repeated. Muslims ruled Spain, point 4, Muslims ruled Spain for about 800 years. The Muslims in Spain never used the sword to force the people to convert. Later, the Christian Crusaders came to Spain and wiped out the Muslims. There was not a single Muslim in Spain who could openly give the adhan, which is the call for prayers. 14 million Arabs are Coptic Christians. Muslims were the lords of Arabia for 1,400 years. For a few years the British ruled, and for a few years the French ruled. Overall, the Muslims ruled Arabia for 1,400 years. Yet today, there are 14 million Arabs who are Coptic Christians. If the Muslims had used the sword, there would not have been a single Arab who would have remained a Christian. The Muslims ruled India for about 1,000 years. If they wanted, they had the power of converting each and every non-Muslim in India to Islam. Today, more than 80% of the population of India are non-Muslims. All these non-Muslim Indians are bearing witness today that Islam was not spread by the sword. Indonesia is a country that has the maximum number of Muslims in the world. The majority of people in Malaysia are Muslims. One may ask, which Muslim army went to Indonesia and Malaysia? Similarly, Islam has spread rapidly on the east coast of Africa. One may ask again, if Islam was spread by the sword, which Muslim army went to the east coast of Africa? The famous historian Thomas Carlyle, in his book Heroes and Hero Worship, refers to the misconception about the spread of Islam. He says, quote, "The sword indeed, but where will you get your sword? Every new opinion at its starting is precisely in a minority of one, in one man's head alone. There it dwells as yet. One man alone of the whole world believes it. There is one man against all men. that he takes a sword and try to propagate with that will do little for him. You must get your sword. On the whole, a thing will propagate itself as it can. Now, with which sword was Islam spread? Even if the Muslims had it, they could not use it to spread Islam because the Quran says in the following verse, let there be no compulsion in religion. Truth stands out clear from error. Quran chapter 2, verse 256. It is the sword of intellect, the sword that conquers the hearts and minds of people. The Quran says in chapter 16, verse 125, invite all to the way of thy Lord with wisdom and beautiful preaching, and argue with them in ways that are best and most gracious. Quran again 16, verse 125. Now, if we look at an increase in the world's religions from 1934 to 1984, an article in the Reader's Digest Almanac Yearbook 1986 gave the statistics of the increase of percentage of the major religions of the world in half a century from 1934 to 1984. The article also appeared in the Plain Truth magazine. At the top was Islam, which increased by 235%, and Christianity increased only by 47%. One may ask, which war took place in this century which converted millions of people to Islam? Islam today is the fastest growing religion in America. The fastest growing religion in Europe is Islam. Which sword is forcing people in the West to accept Islam in such large numbers? Dr. Joseph Adam Pearson rightly says, people who worry that nuclear weaponry will one day fall in the hands of the Arabs fail to realize that the Islamic bomb has been dropped already. It fell the day Muhammad, peace be upon him, was born. In our next video, we'll discuss Muslims are fundamentalists and terrorists. Thanks for joining me. I'm excited to continue this series, Salamu Alaikum, which means peace.